Hey everyone, let's take another look at fog maps in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. These maps are characterized by the foggy effect throughout the whole map, which greatly reduces your visibility at long ranges specifically. Now the main lesson we want to learn today is how to use the fog to remain invisible, or at least much less visible to your enemies. Now look at this guy on the hill here. He is silhouetted perfectly against the fog behind him. The biggest thing that will determine how visible you are is how far you are from the background when somebody is looking at you. I'm looking at this guy, and the background behind him is way down the hill, some 100 or 200 meters away, so he sticks out like a sore thumb, silhouetted against the background of fog. Now the second thing I've noticed is I believe that the fog seems thicker when you are up on a hill looking downwards, compared to when you're down in a valley looking upwards. So this may be a case where fog maps is actually better to be on low ground than on high ground. One, because the fog seems less thick when looking up, and two, someone looking down at you in the valley will see the ground behind you instead of the sky. So let's compare this image to some of the other clips from my fog matches. Going from left to right, we're going to cycle through some images where the target is silhouetted against backgrounds that are very distant and moving closer and closer. So in the second one, even though this guy's very far away, he's still silhouetted very nicely against the distant trees and sky. In the third one, we have a guy who's still silhouetted against a building in the background, but now this building is only 25-50 meters away, so he's starting to blend in a little bit. Now we've got a guy running in a hayfield. Still, he sticks out well against the background because you can see his head especially is still a good 20-30 meters from the hayfield behind him. The fifth image is a guy on a hilltop, but the trees in the background are pretty close, so he starts to get difficult to see, especially since he's in some bushes. Next we have a typical image of a guy just running between buildings. You can still pick him out, but it's much less easy, especially with your peripherals if he's standing still, to find him against the background, which is very near to him. And finally, this final image is the very last kill in the match I'm going to show you next. It was very difficult to see this guy. I've had to circle him with a red circle here so you can even see him. Imagine how different it would be if you were running along the peak of this ridge. I would pick him out extremely easily. So let's go through my recent game, and instead of focusing on the enemies, let's focus on my own positioning, where I'm imagining what I look like to the enemies looking at me, and whether I'm placed with a nice background behind me where I won't be silhouetted against an empty sky. So in this match, I start by dropping in this small village just north of the school. I see very quickly that I'm going to have one guy to duel 1v1. As soon as I get my Uzi, I leave the building to go hunt down my prey. If I know the battle's going to happen eventually, I think I decide I'd rather happen quickly, maybe while he still only has a pistol or something, because I've gotten a submachine gun very quickly. I whiff my first shots, and then it comes down to sneaking around and using my ears to find his positioning and get the jump on him. At this point, if you look in the upper right, you'll see that there's still 68 people alive. I've now compressed the next 10 or 15 minutes of gameplay into a very short period, and we jump ahead to the point where there's only 23 people alive. I honestly played some serious pussy strats here. I was camping, sneaking around, always trying to stay in the center of the circle, and despite some gunshots in the distance, I never actually engaged anybody in this whole 15-minute period. The next most interesting thing that happens as the circle has shrunk significantly is a UAZ comes barreling towards me. I try to get to a point where I'm going to be low against a hill if he were to look at me, and out of the corner of his vision instead of the direction he's driving straight towards. I let him run on past me and decide to refrain from shooting at him now. With as small as the circle is, I'd rather not give away my position to anyone who might be nearby. So next, I set up camp, laying prone, overlooking this very small village to the north. I've tucked myself behind a rock if someone were looking at me from the south, which gives me cover. It also gives me concealment if anyone were looking at me from the north. They would see me against the backdrop of the rock, as opposed to silhouetted against the sky. As I'm camping this village, I notice some movement to my left, and get to pick off this guy who had the same idea I did. Now I've heard shots from this village and I'm pretty sure there's someone camping here. So I'm going to zoom ahead here. I probably camped this town for a good 3 or 4 minutes and eventually the guy comes out. Now I apologize for the horrible shooting here, but let's focus on the fact that I've now moved myself down below the peak of the hill. So I'm on like one little step or ridge with the higher ridge behind me to hopefully not be silhouetted against the sky. So eventually this guy definitely finds out where I am, and I also hear some grenades landing around me. Someone's probably just thrown them towards the direction of my shots. So here I make the decision to just get the hell out of Dodge. I run around towards the edge of the circle, and I want to come up over this hill where I have a good view of the battlefield. Now there's a guy behind a tree here, and I don't notice him at first because the tree is a good backdrop for him. Now I hear some gunfire and I know there's another guy very close to me, and thankfully again this guy silhouetted perfectly against the fog and sky behind him. He was in a firefight with this other guy who, even though he's very distant, sticks out like a sore thumb. So after killing the third and second last guys, there's only one enemy left. Now not to spoil it, but I think he's actually on the road here or laying prone in the grass very nearby. But I can't see him because this guy is utilizing the strategy which I've been talking about. He's hiding in the grass, which makes it very difficult for me to pick him apart. At the time, I assumed that he must have been over the ridge to the left, to the southwest. So I start working my way around there to try to find him. Luckily, somehow, out of the corner of my eye and my peripherals, I do see him moving against the hill behind him. With some more horrible shooting, finally pick him off. It was only his movement that allowed me to pick him out. So not only is your placement against the backdrop important, but I think in fog maps, laying still and laying prone is much more valuable than it may be in clear maps. In clear maps, there's a trade-off. Standing still makes it harder for people to pick you out. However, it makes you a much easier target for getting headshotted or sniped. So sometimes wiggling back and forth and maintaining motion is best in clear maps. But I think in fog maps, the standing still strategy wins because of the importance of not letting the enemies pick up your movement with their vision. I hope this short video was helpful, help you win in fog maps. I swear at this point I win like half of the games I play fog maps. That's probably an exaggeration, but I really find that fog maps are very easy to win if you follow these strategies.